What's going on YouTube? This is Marcus again with another Character Corner. So this is going to be my last Character Corner for this book series, Fireline, Revival of the Draco Sinnincha. So it's available on every platform. Please go ahead and support the books. I'll promote the next book later, but for right now, I want to kind of jump right into this Character Corner. So I think this will be a shorter video, but if it's 20 minutes, then it's 20 minutes. But I don't anticipating it being as long as the other videos are. So without further ado, let's start with my first character. So this is Patricia, aka Pat, a beautiful foundational Black American sister. And she is the parent of one of the girls that Shadowmoor rescues. Now, I'm not going to dwell too much into what happens in this situation. Hopefully, by this time, you guys have gotten the book, or at least am interested in getting the book. But what I want to do, as of all my other characters, is I want to discuss one of the things, or many things, that inspired me to write this character and to dwell deeply into her character traits. So one of the things that you've noticed in this picture is she's wearing scrubs, she has a drink in her hand, and she wears flip-flops. So Pat is a sarcastic, bubbly, fun woman who is a divorcee, single mom, and she is also a traveling nurse. Now, before I go any further, I understand that one of the things that I wanted to portray is I wanted to portray positive messages and portray it in a positive light. That being said, I also wanted to portray realism, and unfortunately we do have a lot of single parent families in our community. Now, I'm not knocking it because I grew up in a single parent family, but one of the things that I wanted to showcase is I wanted to showcase the realism as opposed to showcasing the tropes and basically making it as a proxy for all Black people. For example, I didn't want to create a precious character where the mom was abusive. I didn't want to create somebody who was a strag or somebody who didn't have morals or anything like that. I wanted to create somebody who was relatable, somebody who is dealing with her own set of trauma and dealing it not necessarily in the most healthy way, but in a realistic and not a sadistic way. So those are one of the things that she does. Because of the traumatic things that happened in her past, and I'll kind of touch a little bit deeply into that, every time she comes home, her sort of character trope or trait is she always slips on her flip-flops because her feet are always killing her, and she is always having a glass to drink. So one of the things that I wanted Malik to have is that Malik didn't really have what you would call a mother figure. The closest mother figure that he encounters is pretty much later on in the books, and it's not really dwelled into until the second book, and that is his maternal grandparents. He finds them, and they are kind of slowly getting to know him, and he's trying to get to know them. So he didn't really have a feminine representation of the people that he is trying to save, because once again, Shadowmoor was raised by white people, so they purposely erased his identity and isolated him away from the people that he is supposed to identify with. So one of the things that I wanted to write with Pat is I wanted her to be this well-rounded character to where she is very, very sarcastic, and she is very fun, and she is kind of cougarish. She has a subtle attraction to Shadowmoor, even though she doesn't completely know what he looks like because he has on a hood and he has on a mask. And he chooses not to reveal his identity until later, and it's not the kind of identity in which he says, well, my real name is this and that. She figures it out because she coincidentally used to be a traveling nurse to his late grandfather. And his late grandfather was blind, or he perceived himself to be blind, but she realized that he wasn't blind and that he was basically hiding from the authorities for obvious reasons. And so she is able to piece together these things, and she kind of becomes somewhat of I don't want to say a mentor, but she becomes a confidant in the sense that she notices that he is a square in his alter ego because of his posture and how he talks, and he is very, very rigid and very, very proper. And she makes a joke by saying, well, if you don't loosen up, then I'm just going to have to go cougar on you. And hopefully when people read that, it gives a chuckle. And so after that, he allows himself to relax, and eventually he grows to trust Pat Pat. And so the thing about Pat Pat that I wanted to also emphasize is the fact that I didn't want to make it this sense where she is this strong and independent black woman. And before I go any further, I don't say that to disparage or disrespect black women. I am saying this because I wanted to show a realism, and I wanted to show that, okay, you can be a single mom and successful and you can do these type of things, but that doesn't mean that you don't need some sort of balance in your life. And so what Shadowmoor provides, now mind you, he's not dating Pat Pat or anything like that, or he's not trying to be sexually involved. As a matter of fact, he actually takes some sort of an annoyance towards her, but he also understands that, okay, well, that's just her personality. And there is a clear it's like a clear wall. It's unseen, but there's it's a clear understanding of who both these people are in their positions in this story. That being said, I wrote her as a character that still needed balance and still needed some sort of a masculine approach to things. So then that way she is able to kind of confide her sort of insecurities in a covert way. So she is not one that is going to outwardly admit her struggles until later. And I mentioned this in one of the books where she has a conversation with Shadowmoor, and she says, you must think that I'm just this alcoholic and this and that, but truth be told, I deal with a lot of things. And one of the traumas that she's dealt with is when she first graduated from nursing school, she realizes that a lot of the patients were having these abortions. And she also remembers that a lot of the black men were dying at this point. And I wrote this because it ties into why Malik's mysterious past becomes unraveled. And that's another thing that I want you guys to kind of get out of the book. And so she kind of lives with this kind of guilt because she had this love and she had this enthusiasm and she had all the perks to be able to be the best nurse that she could be. And after that after those first few years or whatnot, working with shady doctors and working with corrupt governments and kind of understanding and realizing and sensing that, okay, there's something deeper that's going on, she decides to become a traveling nurse so that she can kind of escape from that. And she realizes that when her daughter gets kidnapped, that you can't really escape from what I perceive it to be systematic white supremacy. So with that being said, I think that she is a fun character. I kind of drew her buck in her eyes a little bit in Wide Awake, which it wasn't a intent because believe it or not, I'm not really good with drawing people per se, but I wanted to show her as somebody who is a feminine woman in the sense that she likes girly things. Obviously, you see in the picture, her nails are painted and her hair is done and things of that nature. And I wanted to show her somebody that even though she kids and she kind of jokes and she's a bit sarcastic, she is physically, mentally, and emotionally laughing at her pain. And so one of the things that I wrote with Shadowmoor is that Shadowmoor is not only a hero to girls, but he also becomes a hero in the sense that he allows Pat Pat to be herself. Even though she could be inappropriate at times, she's still pretty much herself. So I'm going to go to the next picture, and this next picture is Mason Richardson. Now, Mason Richardson is actually, my inspirations of Mason Richardson is actually Generation X. And just to be a reminder, Generation X is basically the generation after the baby boomers. People born in like 1962, 63-ish, all the way to about 1976, 78-ish. The generation before mine, because I'm a millennial, and I'll be 40 in like 4 or 5 months, whatnot. But with that being said, what Mason represents, first of all, let me tell you a little bit about who Mason Richardson is. And who Mason Richardson is he is a man who is working for the FBI, and he actually goes undercover as a detective in the Atlanta Police Department to find out the corruption that's been going on in the city. He is also tasked with finding people with special lineages who have the power of the Draco Sinistra. And so when he sees Malik, now mind you, he does not relay this information to his confidants, aka the police, because he suspects that the police are involved with a lot of the kidnappings, and he was correct. I don't fully emphasize that, but that's something that you would have to read in the book. He also realizes when Shadowmoor actually stops one of the transports and saves a lot of girls, he is actually instrumental in arresting a lot of the antagonists in this book. So one of the things that I wanted to point out with Mason Richardson is the fact that he is a man who is in turmoil. And this will be later explained on the next book. And if I do another character corner on him, which I may not, I'm not sure. I haven't decided how I want to do this next book series. But with that being said, one of the things that he struggles with is the plight of his people and his commitment to his job. And I think that a lot of people, if not everybody, can relate to this, because sometimes, especially the social media context that we live in, sometimes what you put on social media can get you fired. And I'm aware of that as well, too, because of my job. Now, granted, I work in the oil and gas industry, and I'm gone a lot of times. But with that being said, you never know what type of things that you could say. You never know what people are tracked. When the COVID hit and I was laid off from the oil and gas industry, I worked for FedEx, delivering packages, a modest job. And I'll never forget that one of my bosses had me train somebody who was a lesbian, and then she actually got fired because she posted some things that were inappropriate, quote unquote. But I think that he had something against, people who live that type of lifestyle, which I am indifferent about it, except for when it deals with white supremacy and the oppression of black people. But that's another conversation and another video for another day. With that being said, I digress back to Mason Richardson. These are some of the dilemmas that he's dealing with. I'm not going to spoil why he has those type of dilemmas in this regard, because it's going to placate into his story arc in the next book. What I will say is that he chooses to redeem his obligations and redeem his ancestors, because he actually comes from a lineage of freedom fighters. So another thing that I wanted to point out with Mason Richardson is, if you notice, I drew him as somebody who is older, clean cut, with waves and things like that. And once again, this guy's a Generation Xer. So a lot of these guys right now are going into their 60s, actually. They are in their mid to late 50s or whatnot. And so he is that guy that actually becomes that older individual that is willing to pass the torch. And I think that this is very, very important, because let me tell you a quick story in terms of my experience in the church. When I was going through my first divorce, this was back in 2014, my late grandfather was stricken and he actually suffered a stroke. So he was a deacon, and he wasn't able to do some of the same things that he was able to do, and he was relegated into a wheelchair for the most part. So one of the things I did for his last year in his life is I would take him to his Bible studies, I would take him to Brotherhood, and I would take him to church, because church was his life. And in doing so, I started studying the word, because there were times where it was his turn for him to present what was going on in the Bible and some kind of lessons and things like that. So I would help him do that because he was unable to, speak as long. So when it was his turn, I'd go up there and I'd help him with brotherhood and things like that. And one of the things that I've noticed is that when I brought a new perspective when it came to the word and to life and things of that nature, a lot of the older men were very, very reluctant for me to take that lead. And I'm not saying this to denigrate or disrespect. What I am saying is that there is a time where young men are supposed to lead. And then in most situations and in most societies, it is usually the young men who are actually taking charge because they have the energy. And the old men are supposed to be there to mentor and to provide that type of guidance and that okay and the cosign. Unfortunately, in the past couple of years, you would have older men not wanting to relinquish their power and relinquish their authority because of whatever reasons, but Mason is actually the opposite of that. And towards the end of the book, he starts to realize that, you know what, I can't finish this fight. I'm just going to have to leave it to the younger guys. But I know that these younger guys aren't built like we were built. I think that they're built stronger. And so one of the things that, and I know I keep saying that, but another last point that I wanted to make with Mason Richardson is that I want to write a character arc in which he does redeem himself and he becomes exalted and he becomes respected. And I think that's one of the differences between elders and just old dudes. As the Black Authority, if you ever get a chance to check him out, please do. He is very, very instrumental and a big influence in my life and in my work. So shout out to the Black Authority. One of the things that he has often said is that just because people make it to old age doesn't make us our elders. And so with Mason Richardson, I am planning on writing him as somebody who is going to be revered as an elder. So with that being said, it looks like this video did take as long as the last ones, but that's okay. Please take the time to check out the links in the bio of the books. You can find them anywhere, especially Generational Bursts. Hopefully in, I'd say the next, I'm probably going to take a breather here for the next, I'd say month or two, maybe 3, who knows, because I really need to get back to writing the last book of this trilogy. It's becoming difficult, not because of what I want to say, but more so how I want to say it. And it is mentally taxing to write a book, let alone a trilogy. So with that being said, please take the time to check the video and my other videos. Please like, share, comment. If you want to get a hold of me and ask me any kind of questions or whatnot, the information will be in the bio. Take care, and we'll see you next time. Peace.